Hello, Tom Maguire. So I'm just going to do a review on the essential A.A Gill, Far and Away. Now, this came into my Audible recommendation, so I listened to this one. By the way, it's narrated by Bill Nighy, who is absolutely fantastic. I've always loved him, I've always loved his voice, absolutely brilliant. So he's fantastic to narrate this book. I have a couple of confessions to make. I knew who A.A Gill was before, but purely only because I'd read a couple of his articles over the years in the Sunday Times. I knew him as well through his association. I don't know how much of a friend he was with Jeremy Clarkson, but I knew that he was. And I've always, I hate to admit, been a bit of a fan of Jeremy Clarkson as well. I know lots of people don't like him, but I don't care. I think he's hilarious. I grew up watching Top Gear. I just love his sense of humour. I think so many people take him too seriously, and I think it's the same with A.A Gill as well, as far as I can tell. He comes across as very kind of cutting, and he tends to swear a bit, and he comes across as the sort of guy you wouldn't want to get into an argument with because you feel as though he'd just completely tear shreds off you. But actually, maybe although there may well be some truth in that, I think some of the research I've done, some of the videos I've seen of him on YouTube, I think he's probably a much more sensitive, a much more sensitive, kind person than people kind of gave him credit for potentially. Certainly people who didn't know him, maybe. And this book is just absolutely, he's just a terrific writer. I love that word. I think terrific. I think that just really sums him up. I think just I've said this a couple of times already in some of my reviews that I've read. I've kind of said this is one of the best books I've read so far this year, but this one really is definitely up there. It has to be in the top three. I haven't actually sat down since listening to it and looked at all the books I've read so far this year. I think I've got through about 90 something. I'm not entirely sure. It's in the 90s, I think. So I can't remember off the top of my head every single one. I need to sit down and refer back and have a think about it. But I think this is one of my favourites. I'm already listening to it for a second time now, and I'll probably buy it and actually read it as well. But it was difficult. I started listening to it on my way up to Gloucester the other day because I was training a group of staff up there, and I put it on in the car at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I started it, and it's kind of in two minds. I sort of thought, am I going to enjoy this or not? I feel as though maybe I want to listen to something a bit more specific. I want to personal development or something. Is this a bit of a left field choice for me? I'm not too sure if I'm going to like it or not. And it took a little while, maybe half an hour or something, before I started getting into the rhythm of it. And it's just great. He just had such a talent for writing, I think. I kind of wish I'd discovered him before. He died in 2016 from cancer, very sadly. Unfortunately, he was only 62 years old, so the world has been robbed of a fantastic talent, basically. I'm pretty sure he would have written a lot more. So, there's a lot of stuff that we're not going to get to read or listen to that would have been very entertaining, unfortunately. There's an introduction by his daughter Flora, which I found really touching. Really quite touching, actually. I was almost in tears listening to it. And she talks about seeing her dad in London, I think in the park. Was it in Hyde Park, she says? Somewhere around there anyway, and she looks up and she thinks she can see him in the distance and stuff, but she doesn't want to shout out because she doesn't want to make a fool of herself calling some stranger dad, as when you call your teacher mum, sort of likens it to that. And yeah, just really nice. And she says about being proud of her dad and stuff, and that just kind of struck a chord with me a little bit. I tend to think about my kids a little bit, and I sort of think, what they're going to think of me. I'm a bit of a black sheep in my family to some extent. Everyone's kind of quite academic, and I've done lots of different things over the years. I've never really found my niche particularly, but in recent years I've started my business with my wife, and I've really loved that. And my passion is kind of entrepreneurship and business and training people, coaching people. I kind of feel as though I found that. And A.A Gill says in one of his YouTube videos how he just worked and worked, and then he became when he realized he was good at writing, it was a real relief because he felt as though there was something he was actually good at. And I really relate to that. But I also relate to Flora in her introduction when she says about being in school and being able to say, they say it was good if you had a parent whose job you could describe quite easily, like if they were a doctor or teacher or something like that. And I can understand that. My dad was a doctor, my mum was a teacher, and It's always quite straightforward. Yeah, doctor, teacher. She says it was always quite weird, trying to explain what her dad did, eating and writing about food and traveling and writing about traveling and things. But yeah, absolutely fantastic. The more I kind of listen to this book, the more I sort of watch him on YouTube with different things, read about him. What an interesting guy! Just really, and I just find him. I just find him really inspiring personally. I just think listening to him, one of his videos where he's talking to a group of journalists and he's saying how he does fully believe what he says, even when it offends people. He doesn't regret what he writes, and he says how he was always passionate about getting people's stories, and you get the feeling that he's very sensitive to people's struggles, such as the refugees. He writes about the Syrian refugees in this book, which is really sad. People in Africa who are, you know, suffering with river blindness and things, and some of it is really quite depressing, actually. Some of it was quite difficult to listen to. But then there's the real light-hearted stuff that really kind of picks you up and makes you laugh as well. It does have that dark humour, that sort of cynical humour, I suppose, but just so well written. Just kind of, I don't really have the ability to review this book as much as I would like, to be fair. I come away from a book like this feeling really inspired and really kind of, oh wow, it'd be fantastic to be able to kind of write like that and speak like that. And I want to do a review to sort of justify it, but I'm not at that stage yet. But this channel is about personal development. One of the reasons I started this channel was, you know, not only to leave honest reviews to my children years to come, for them to be able to laugh at me and kind of understand the things that I read, but also for me to get better at talking about the books that I read, and to get better at sort of talking in general, I suppose, as well, in front of a camera and under pressure and all that sort of stuff. And I find that, you know, I'm still nowhere near as competent as I want to be. I'm pretty confident that, you know, the more I do it, years to come, I will get better and better. So maybe I'll review this book again in a few years' time when I'm much better at it. But yeah, I just really enjoy it. It's one of those books that kind of gives me sort of goosebumps a little bit. For different reasons, the style of the writing, the description, the imagery. Some of the imagery is just crystal clear. Listening to it, it's just fantastic. But also listening to him on YouTube as well, he talks about how he kind of hints at the fact that his kind of swearing, kind of more abusive side is more marketable because it kind of makes people laugh. And obviously, as a journalist, you have to have an angry response from people. You can't have everyone liking you and kind of accepting what you're saying. You need people to get irritated by you. But he sort of says the reason he started was to sort of get out there and tell the truth about people, you know, people's stories. And I think that's really quite nice. A real honest sort of thing to say, quite vulnerable. So yeah, he was best known for his food and his travel writing. Wrote a column in the Sunday Times, very witty. I think he's got a real kind of curiosity, which I liken to someone like Bill Bryson, and that's maybe a bit of a limit. That's not a particularly great comparison, but just for me, being someone who I suppose I'm thinking about books that I reviewed in recent times. That are similar, because I haven't read anything very much like this at all, to be fair. So I love Bill Bryson's stuff because he just talks, he writes with such curiosity. He's interested in everything, and he refers back to different parts of history and stories, and I just find it fascinating. And I found this kind of the same, and well, not the same, but similar. Although on a kind of more sophisticated level, I suppose. I'm not saying he's more sophisticated than Bill Bryson necessarily, but I think his writing is more sophisticated, probably. Potentially, anyway, more obviously sophisticated, perhaps. He maybe even pretentious. Who knows? So yeah, really interesting. I absolutely love this book. I can't really kind of rave about it enough. I can't really do it justice in this review, unfortunately. I wish I could. I'm hoping in a few years' time, when I'm more practiced at this sort of stuff, I'll be much better and I can do a better review for this kind of thing. But fantastic book. I really enjoyed it. A.A. Gill, what a legend. Please like and subscribe as usual, and get out there and read this book or listen to it. It's fantastic.